I used to believe my son was the last good thing left in my life after my husband died. But on Thanksgiving Day, when he put his hand on my shoulder and asked, "Do you like the lake house I gave you?" I knew then. He didn't give me anything. He stole everything. If you think this is just another family story, you're wrong. Subscribe now to watch more revenge stories you'll never forget. The kettle hissed a weary tune in Clara's dimly lit kitchen. Steam drifted into the cold air like a sigh from a tired soul. The walls faded from years of sun, and silence had not heard laughter in a long time. Clara sat alone at the small round table, hands cupped tightly around her chipped porcelain mug, one of the few things she'd kept from her old life before things fell apart. Her knuckles trembled as she lifted the tea to her lips, peppermint weak from being steeped one too many times. She wasn't wasting another fresh bag this week. The pension check hadn't arrived on time again. She'd been forced to choose between heat and groceries yesterday. Groceries won. Outside, the November wind lashed against the house, rattling the window panes. Clara didn't flinch. She was used to the sound of things breaking. Across the table sat a photo framed in polished oak, dusted each Sunday morning. Her husband, Harold, smiled from behind the glass, frozen in time. Thick glasses, crooked tie, a face etched with patience. His hand rested on hers in the photo. He'd been dead 9 years now. Some days she could still hear his voice. Most days she only heard silence. She whispered toward the frame. "You'd know what to do, wouldn't you, Harold?" The house responded with nothing but the hum of the old refrigerator. Clara's bones ached as she stood up. The tea didn't help much these days. She moved slowly, every step purposeful, each motion rationed like the rest of her life. She passed the living room where piles of bills sat unopened. The heater coughed to life for a few brief seconds before dying again. The air remained bitter. Her landline rang, an abrupt foreign sound in the silence. Clara paused, almost afraid to answer. No one called anymore, not unless it was a telemarketer or someone asking for money. She picked up the phone, breath tight in her chest. "Hello?" Her voice was cautious, thin. "Hi." Clara came, a soft voice, uncertain. Clara gripped the receiver harder. "Yes. Who's this?" It's Jill. I hope this isn't a bad time." Clara's shoulders stiffened. Jill, her former daughter-in-law. The same woman who vanished after the divorce, never called, never visited. Didn't even send a card when Clara had her hip surgery last year. Now that voice suddenly here, sounding sweeter than Clara remembered. She said nothing for a moment, letting the silence stretch. "I know this is out of the blue," Jill continued. I've been thinking about you. A lot. And I know things ended badly, but Clara, I'm really sorry. Why now?" Clara asked flatly. There was a pause. "I got divorced officially 2 months ago, and I've been reevaluating everything. I hurt people. I left loose ends. You were good to me. I shouldn't have disappeared like I did. I don't want to make excuses. I wanted to see if I could come by. Maybe visit for a while. Help out if you need it." Clara's stomach turned. The word help lodged in her throat like a bone. But something in Jill's voice rehearsed or not echoed in the corners of Clara's loneliness. "Just a visit," Clara said. "Just a visit," Jill repeated, her tone brightening. Clara hung up the phone slowly. Her fingers lingered on the receiver. She didn't know what she felt. Reluctance, curiosity, or something more dangerous, hope. 2 days later, Jill stood at the doorstep with a wide smile and a box of pastries from the French bakery downtown. Clara hadn't had anything from there in years. It was always too expensive, too extravagant. She remembered treating herself and Harold to one eclair each after they'd paid off their mortgage. That was a lifetime ago. "Clara," Jill said, voice gentle, eyes gleaming like she might cry. Clara opened the door, lips pressed tight. Her cardigan was buttoned all the way up despite the suffocating heater she'd turned on just for this visit. She didn't know why. Maybe to keep the cold out of her bones. Maybe to keep Jill at a distance. "Come in," she said. The hug Jill gave her was soft, careful. The scent of expensive perfume, vanilla, and something Clara didn't recognize floated into the room. Jill looked good, too good. They sat down over tea and raspberry danishes. Clara didn't say much. Jill filled the space easily, telling stories about her failed marriage, her new therapy routine, how she'd realized she'd been toxic, selfish, how sorry she was. Clara listened, nodding occasionally, her face unreadable. At one point, Jill reached across the table and touched Clara's hand. "I don't expect you to forgive me overnight, but I want to earn back your trust. I want to help now. I have the time, and honestly, I could use the company too." Clara looked down at Jill's manicured fingers, smooth pink moisturized. "You don't have to stay," Clara said. "But if you want to, I suppose you can take the guest room, just for a few days." Jill smiled. "Thank you." Later that evening, as Jill unpacked upstairs, Clara wandered into the spare room Harold had once used as an office. She hadn't opened that door in months, maybe years. Dust blanketed the bookshelves. Old lesson plans from their teaching days still sat in labeled boxes. His desk, oak worn, still smelled faintly of pencil shavings and pipe tobacco. She moved slowly, fingers brushing along the edge of a drawer. She wasn't looking for anything in particular. Maybe she just wanted to feel close to him again. In the top drawer, tucked behind some yellowing papers, was the music box. Clara gasped softly. It had been Harold's gift to her on their 25th anniversary. She thought it had been lost after the fall when he went to the hospital. But here it was untouched. The wooden box was small, carved with vines and birds. She wound it once, and the tune began to play, soft, lilting, almost sad. Their song, the same one they danced to in the kitchen on quiet Friday nights. Clara closed her eyes, and then she noticed something strange. A thin strip of paper was sticking out beneath the felt lining. Her heart kicked. She pulled it free. On it, a set of 6 numbers, faded, smudged but still legible. She didn't recognize the handwriting. It wasn't Harold's neat cursive, but the numbers were circled twice in black ink. Her mind reeled. A code, a date, a password. She stared at the numbers, 22 of 63. Nothing clicked, not yet. But something inside her shifted. She didn't know what the numbers meant, but she knew what they felt like. A warning, a secret, a door waiting to be unlocked. She held the paper to her chest and looked toward the hall, where Jill's shadow moved quietly past the stairwell. The music box played on Eerie and Beautiful, and Clara, for the first time in years, didn't feel old. She felt awake. The snow had started falling again, light, soft, harmless. Clara watched it settle on the windowsill like powdered sugar as the scent of rosemary chicken drifted in from the kitchen. Jill was humming. Not a song Clara recognized. Something contemporary, careless, upbeat. She stirred a pot on the stove as if she'd lived in this house for years, not just 5 days. "Smells good," Clara said, entering slowly with her mug in hand. Jill turned, beaming. "It's your favorite, right? Harold used to make it every winter." Clara raised an eyebrow. "He did. I found the recipe in that old binder," Jill said, pointing to a stack of weathered cookbooks. "Thought I'd surprise you." Clara sat at the table, watching her carefully. "You're full of surprises lately." Jill laughed, trying to be better. Dinner was warm, tender, perfectly seasoned. Jill poured a glass of red wine. She had picked up a bottle from the store as a treat. Clara didn't object. Something in her wanted to let go just for a moment. They talked about harmless things, the snowstorm coming next week, how the local church was changing pastors, the stray cat Jill had seen out back. But later that night, long after the dishes were washed and Jill had retired to the guest room, Clara stood in the hallway still. She'd heard something. A creak, light, intentional. She didn't move at first, didn't breathe, just listened. The sound came again, a drawer opening. She moved toward the office, Harold's old room, silent as breath. She pressed her ear to the door. Another soft shuffle. Paper. Clara's chest tightened. She pushed the door open without warning. The room was empty. The desk drawer was slightly ajar. She stepped in, turned on the lamp. Everything looked fine, except it wasn't. She could feel it, like a chill through the floorboards. She closed the drawer, turned off the light, and backed out slowly. Her heart wouldn't settle. The next morning, a white envelope from Capital Line Bank sat on the doormat. Clara frowned. She hadn't banked with them in years. Inside was a notice for a new online account registered in her name. A welcome letter full of cheerful language and customer service numbers. She read it 3 times. The name was hers. The address was hers. But she had never opened this account. She folded the letter slowly, placed it back in the envelope, and slid it into her sweater pocket. Later at breakfast, she didn't mention it. Jill brought her pancakes, too many, too sweet, and chatted about reorganizing the hallway closet. "I could sort through those old files for you too," she offered. "I know your hands hurt in the cold." Clara looked up from her tea. "What files?" "Oh, just, Harold's old documents. Thought you might want to declutter." Clara smiled faintly. "I'm not quite ready to let those go." That night, Jill waited until Clara said goodnight and went upstairs. But Clara didn't sleep. She watched the hallway from her cracked door lights off. Just after midnight, Jill came down the steps. She wore socks, moved like a shadow. Clara waited. 10 minutes. 15. Then she followed. From the stairs, she saw the faint glow of the office lamp. She crept closer, careful not to let the boards creak. Jill was inside, her back-turned phone in one hand, the other flipping through folders. "No, she hasn't seen anything," Jill whispered. "Yeah. SSN is on her birth certificate. Got the house deed, too. I'll scan them later." Clara turned away before she heard more. Her lungs burned, but she didn't make a sound. She returned to her room and sat on the edge of the bed until sunrise. In the morning, she bought a camera. It wasn't fancy, just a small motion-activated model meant for baby monitoring or checking on pets. She installed it above the bookshelf in the office, right behind a row of encyclopedias. Then she waited. The footage came in fragments, clips, delivered to her old laptop via an app that took her 20 minutes to figure out. At 1:12 a.m., Jill returned to the office, pulled open the same drawers, snapped photos of a W-2, smiled. At 2:05 a.m., she opened the filing cabinet, found the deed to the house, whispered something Clara couldn't hear. Clara saved the clip. That afternoon, Jill brought home flowers. Sunflowers, Clara's favorite. No reason, she said. Just felt like brightening the place. "You always were good at timing," Clara replied, trimming the stems. Jill tilted her head. That a compliment? Clara didn't answer. Instead, she went to the office later that evening, closed the door, pulled the music box from the drawer again, wound it. The tune filled the room, dancing through shadows. She opened the lid. Inside, the same slip of paper rested like a sleeping secret. But this time she noticed something different. Etched beneath the lining, barely visible unless you tilted the box just right, were words faded, carved by a hand too gentle to press deep. "If anything happens, trust our memories." Clara inhaled sharply. It was Harold's handwriting. That gentle curve of the S, the long tail on the H, she'd seen it on 1,000 birthday cards, grocery lists, lesson plans. This was no coincidence. She ran her finger over the words again, slower. Trust our memories. What was he trying to say? What was she forgetting? She brought the box closer, inspecting every corner. The hinges, the felt, the base. Then slowly she turned it upside down. 4 screws. She fetched a screwdriver from the kitchen and returned, unscrewing the base carefully. Inside, tucked between the mechanics of the music box and the wood frame, was another slip of paper, folded tightly, yellowed. She opened it. K-Safe 4081, Michigan Trust, behind books, not bank. She stared at it, her breath catching. Safe. She had a safe. She hadn't opened it since Harold died. It was behind the bookshelf, literally behind the books, hidden in the wall. He had insisted they keep one there for just in case. She thought it only had old documents. Clara turned her eyes toward the office wall. The bookshelf. The books. Suddenly Harold's words made sense. If anything happens. She turned back to the laptop, hit play on the newest clip. Jill. Again. Midnight. Pulling out a checkbook Clara hadn't touched in years. Clara clenched her fists. It wasn't just snooping. It was theft. It was identity fraud. It was betrayal dressed in warm smiles and homemade casseroles. She stood there still as stone, letting the fury settle. And as the music box's song trailed off into silence, something inside her sharpened. This was no longer about the past. This was war, quiet, strategic, and precise. And Clara, old bones and all, was going to win it. The envelope was thick, heavy, almost accusatory in Clara's hands. It bore her name, full name, middle initial, included typed neatly in bold black font. She didn't recognize the sender, but she knew what kind of letter it was before she even opened it. Something about the weight of it felt hostile. She sat at the kitchen table, the morning sun slicing across the floor in long, cold beams. Her hands trembled slightly as she unfolded the pages. It was a credit card statement. From a bank she didn't use. Balance 7482.31. Charges included electronics from Best Buy, 3 separate deliveries from high-end clothing brands, and a weekend stay at a luxury downtown hotel. Clara's heart slammed once against her ribs, then dropped like a stone. She flipped to the back. The card was issued in her name, her address, her social security number. She let out a sound, half gasp, half choke, and gripped the edge of the table to steady herself. Her tea went cold beside her, forgotten. "Jill," she whispered. The nausea came quickly. It burned up through her throat and into her chest. Jill had done this. Jill with her quiet movements and 2 sweet apologies. Jill who was smiling upstairs right now, probably scrolling through her phone in Clara's guest bed, planning her next purchase. Clara walked to the sink and splashed cold water on her face. Then she moved. To the office. To the bookshelf. She didn't hesitate this time. Her fingers knew what to do. She pulled the first shelf away 3 solid inches. The second moved even easier, revealing the small gray safe embedded in the wall. She hadn't touched it in over a decade. Her palms were slick as she knelt. She pulled the crumpled slip from her cardigan, the one with the 6 faded numbers from the music box. 220463. She turned the dial. Left, right, left. Click. The door creaked open with a reluctant groan. Inside was dust and air and 2 manila folders, thick and yellowing with age. Clara sat back on her heels, staring at them as if they might bite. The first folder held a copy of Harold's will. It was dated a year before his death. The ink was Harold's, she'd know it anywhere. The signature was smooth, familiar. He had left the house they currently lived in to their son. That part she knew. But there was more. A second property. One Clara had never heard of. A home in Traverse City, Michigan. Lakefront. Built in 1918. Fully owned. Appraised value at the time, $293,000. Left to Clara. Sole beneficiary. Clara's breath froze. She flipped the pages quickly, her eyes scanning the lines for error. There wasn't one. The deed was tucked in the second folder, along with a policy from Lakeside Assurance, a life insurance document showing a payout of $120,000 issued upon Harold's death. Beneficiary Clara E. McMillan. The payout had been issued, but Clara had never seen a dime. She felt a roar rising in her head, something between rage and heartbreak. She hadn't just been forgotten. She had been erased. She sat there on the carpet, surrounded by secrets, and wept without sound. How had they hidden this from her? Her son. Jill. The 2 of them must have known. The insurance, the second house. The documents had to have been intercepted. Stolen, just like everything else. Clara closed the folders slowly, hands steadying. This wasn't just betrayal. It was theft. Planned deliberate and cruel. She stood and carried the folders back to the kitchen. The clock ticked loudly on the wall. The refrigerator buzzed to life. Clara's grief hardened. She grabbed her coat. It was time to talk to someone who could help. The law office sat in a modest strip mall between a laundromat and a deli. The sign above read, Walter and Green Estate Planning Probate Elder Law. Clara had known Carol Walter since 1985. They'd served on the same school board committee once. Carol had aged well, her posture still sharp. Her hair perfectly silver, her gaze as direct as ever. "I need this to be confidential," Clara said as she sat across from her. "Of course," Carol replied. "You look determined." Clara pulled the folders from her bag and laid them out on the table. Carol's eyes moved quickly, trained and sharp. She didn't speak until she'd gone through all of it. "This is valid," she finally said. "All of it. The property, the insurance payout, the will. These aren't copies, they're originals. You are the legal heir." Clara nodded once. "But Clara, if you never received this money or knew about this house, someone interfered. And that is a crime." "I know. Do you suspect who?" "I don't just suspect." Clara's voice dropped to a razor edge. "I have footage. Jill's been snooping in my documents. She's using my information. She's already stolen my identity, once new credit cards accounts. I'm sure she's planning more." Carol leaned back, fingers steepled. "And your son?" Clara looked away. "He's not in the picture anymore. Haven't heard from him in 3 years. I have no idea how deep this goes." Carol sighed. "Do you want to go to the police?" "Not yet," Clara said. "I want to be ready first. I want everything documented. I want to know exactly how far she's gone before I make a move." Carol gave a slow nod. "We can start by securing the Michigan property. I'll get a copy of the deed from the county records. Then we'll check for any recent activity sales listings, mortgage attempts. Clara exhaled, the weight of years pressing against her lungs. Thank you, she whispered. Carol reached across the table. Clara, you are not alone. Meanwhile, Jill was busy. She had spent the last 2 afternoons on the phone quietly, efficiently. She had pulled the address from the will. She'd Googled photos of the house. She'd contacted a realtor in Traverse City under a fake name, posing as the rightful heir, looking to sell a family property quickly. The woman on the other end had seemed eager. It's a beautiful place, she said. I actually drive past it every day. Haven't seen anyone there in years. Jill smiled. Exactly. It's just sitting there. It's time to let it go. She booked a trip for the following weekend, claimed she was visiting a friend in Indiana. Clara never asked, at least not yet. And that was the mistake Jill made. She assumed the silence meant permission. But Clara wasn't blind anymore. She was watching, and she was waiting. The real estate office was tucked inside a downtown brick building in Traverse City, quiet and unassuming, perfect for a quick, under-the-radar transaction. Jill stepped through the glass doors, wearing a gray wool coat and a confident smile, clutching a manila folder like it was the key to her second chance at life. Inside, a realtor named Gavin shook her hand. Young, polished, hungry. He'd been in the business less than 2 years and was still wide-eyed about the idea of legacy properties. This place you're selling, Gavin said as he led her to his desk. You know it's got history, right? Locals call it the Whisper House. Used to belong to a music teacher, I think. Your father. My father-in-law, Jill said smoothly. It's been vacant for a while. The paperwork took forever, but we're finally ready to let it go. She handed him the folder. Inside, forged letters of representation, a fake power of attorney document bearing Clara's name, and a signed intent to sell. Everything looked official. Everything smelled like theft. Back in Chicago, Clara watched the entire exchange from her laptop. The security cam she'd hidden in Jill's purse a week earlier, an AirTag camera hybrid her lawyer had recommended, was working like a charm. It wasn't just video, it was audio. She listened as Jill lied without flinching, heard her claim to be acting on behalf of an elderly woman who didn't want the stress. Clara's face was stone. Carol, her lawyer, sat beside her at the kitchen table, jotting down notes as the stream played. She's bold, Carol muttered. She's stupid, Clara replied. That boy didn't even ask to verify anything. Which is good. It makes this easier. Clara closed the laptop slowly. The anger was no longer burning. It was cold now, quiet, refined, useful. She opened a file folder and slid it toward Carol. I found these too. I pulled my credit report. There are 5 new accounts I didn't authorize. Jewelry, flights, appliances. Carol flipped through the printed statements, all opened in the last 6 months. Using my name, Clara added. My social. One of the cards was used to buy a MacBook at a mall in Evanston. I haven't left this zip code in over a year. Carol leaned back, sighing through her teeth. She's built a web. She's getting ready to cash out, Clara said. I think the Traverse City house is the final score. Carol nodded. We'll freeze your credit flag, every account, and file a formal claim. But if you want to press criminal charges... Not yet, Clara interrupted. She reached for the music box on the sideboard, wound it once, let the tune play. I want her to walk right up to the cliff, she said, voice low. Then I'll show her the fall. That night, Jill cooked dinner. She made Harold's favorite meatloaf with caramelized onions and mashed sweet potatoes. She even set the table with the old wedding china, claiming she'd found it buried under clutter. Clara sat quietly at the table, her hands folded. Jill lit candles. Thought we'd have a little celebration, Jill said cheerfully. You've been feeling stronger lately. I can see it. Clara nodded. You've helped. I'm just happy to be back. Jill said, her eyes soft. Feels like home again. Clara studied her. The lies were layered thick, but Jill had gotten better at telling them. Her voice didn't shake. Her eyes didn't flinch, but her hands fidgeted, and Clara noticed. After dinner, they sat on the couch. Jill poured them each a glass of wine. I've been thinking, Jill said carefully, about the future, about staying here longer, helping you manage things. You shouldn't have to deal with all this stuff by yourself. Clara looked down into her glass. What stuff? You know, the bills, the house, your health, the estate, everything. Clara met her gaze. So you want to help manage my life now? Jill laughed nervously. That came out wrong. I want to be here for you. Clara smiled faintly. You're very kind. Jill relaxed into the couch, sipping her wine. She thought she was winning. She had no idea the net was already closing. Later that night, Clara sat in the office. She replayed the footage again, this time with Carol's timeline spreadsheet beside her. Jill had contacted the Traverse City realtor 4 days ago. The forged documents were dated 3 weeks prior. The jewelry purchases began in February. The online bank accounts were opened over the summer. It was a slow drip, intentional. Like termites in a foundation, by the time you noticed the damage, it was too late. But Clara wasn't just noticing. She was documenting. Each piece was time-stamped. Every forgery paired with a video clip. Each statement matched with Clara's notarized declarations and certified mailings. The case was building itself. Carol would submit it to the State Fraud Division when Clara gave the word. But Clara wasn't done yet. She wanted Jill to show her true face, to drop the mask entirely. So she did something unexpected. She invited Jill to sit down with her the next morning. I need help with something, Clara said as Jill walked into the living room still in pajamas. Sure, what's up? Clara handed her a box. Inside, photos of Harold old lesson plans, some of Clara's poetry, and a packet of financial documents deliberately planted. Can you help me go through these? I want to get my affairs in order. Jill blinked. Are you okay? I just don't want to leave a mess, Clara said softly. You've been so helpful lately. I trust you. Jill's eyes lit up just slightly. She sat down beside Clara and opened the folder. Behind the mirror on the mantel, Clara's second hidden camera recorded everything. Every glance, every smirk, every time Jill took a photo of a document when she thought Clara wasn't looking. Clara offered coffee. Jill accepted, eyes still fixed on the prize. That evening, Clara watched the footage again. Carol sat beside her, quiet hands folded. I think she's planning to close on the Michigan house in a few days, Clara said. You said the listing was already pending. She's fast, Carol muttered. She's sloppy, Clara replied. She paused the video on Jill's face, grinning down at the fake bank statements Clara had slipped in. I'm ready, Clara said. Carol raised an eyebrow. For what? Clara looked at her. To end it. The early morning was hushed, tense, like the stillness before a storm. Clara sat at the kitchen table, her cardigan wrapped tight, eyes locked on a blueprint sketch that Carol had drawn by hand, a map of their home, labeled in careful strokes. Entryway, living room, study, hallway, camera. A cam, B mic on bookshelf. Are you sure about this? Carol asked. Clara's voice didn't waver. Absolutely. They were done waiting, done reacting. Now they would record everything. Carol slid 2 small devices across the table. One looked like a plug-in air freshener, the other like a picture frame. Clara nodded. Within 30 minutes they were mounted. One near the front door, one tucked inside the clock on the fireplace mantel. Both motion-triggered, synced to a cloud account in Carol's name. Encrypted. Untouchable. If she so much as breathes in the wrong direction, Carol said, we'll know. Clara sipped her tea, steady-handed. She will. That afternoon, Clara began the act. She shuffled slowly into the living room, holding a stack of papers upside down, muttering to herself. She pretended not to recognize the thermostat, stared too long at the microwave. Jill noticed. At first, she hovered, polite, gentle, offering help with a forced patience that barely hid her anticipation. Do you need me to organize those for you? She asked, nodding at the papers. I was trying to figure out which is which, Clara mumbled, faking frustration. All this legal stuff. It's so overwhelming now. Jill sat beside her on the couch. You don't have to worry about any of that. I can sort it out. Clara handed her the pile. Jill flipped through it, pulling out 3 forms that she'd planted herself the day before, documents with subtle language designed to appear as routine updates. Change of ownership, transfer of representation, authorization to act on Clara's behalf. She smiled. These are just signatures for administrative things. Nothing important. Clara squinted at the text. I don't understand. It's just formality, Jill lied. I've done all the hard parts already. You just need to sign. Clara took the pen, paused, then signed with her left hand. The signature was jagged, awkward. It wouldn't hold up in court. It wasn't hers. She knew exactly what she was doing. Jill folded the papers quickly and slid them into her bag. Thank you, she said with that same sugar-slick voice. This is going to make everything so much easier. Clara smiled. You're such a blessing. Later that evening, Clara sat quietly in the hallway, just around the corner from the living room. The mic in the bookshelf was already live, but she wanted to hear it with her own ears. Jill sat on the couch, cross-legged, phone in hand. "I got her to sign them," she whispered. "No, I'm not joking. She didn't even ask questions. Totally senile now. It's only a matter of time." She laughed, high-pitched, confident. "Yeah, the house, the policy, everything's mine. I'll be out of here in 2 weeks tops." Clara closed her eyes, not from pain but from clarity. The line had been crossed. It was time to bring in someone who knew how to shine light into rot. The following morning, Clara took a walk. She hadn't done that in weeks. The cold bit into her coat wind, slicing through the thin fabric. But she didn't care. She boarded the downtown bus, rode 6 stops, and got off in front of a small cafe with a red awning and a sign that read, "Done and Done Local Investigative Journalism since 1974. She stepped inside. The bell above the door chimed. A woman in her early 30s looked up from a desk cluttered with interview tapes and notepads. "Aunt Clara?" she asked, surprised. "No," Clara said, smiling faintly, "but close. It's me, Mrs. McMillan, from Bridgeview Elementary." The young woman's eyes widened. "Miss McMillan? Oh my God, you were my 5th grade teacher." "I was." "Clara, it's been forever. What are you doing here?" The woman's name was Monica Dunn. She'd been in Clara's classroom the year her mother was arrested. Clara had stayed after school with her every day for a month until Child Services stepped in. Now Monica was the voice behind dozens of stories exposing elder abuse, housing corruption, and Medicaid fraud in Cook County. "I need your help," Clara said quietly. Monica gestured to a chair. "Anything." Clara pulled a thick folder from her tote bag and placed it on the desk. Inside, photos, printouts of emails, copies of credit reports, video stills, timelines, audio transcripts. "This isn't for publication," Clara said. "Not yet. I just need you to hold it. Hold it, read it, understand it. And if anything happens to me, if I vanish or stop calling you or get confused in a hospital somewhere, I need you to publish everything. Leak it, bury her in it." Monica's jaw tightened. "Are you in danger?" "No, not yet. But I might be in someone's way." Monica looked down at the folder. "You want me to be your insurance?" "I want the truth to outlive me." Silence. Then Monica reached across the desk. "You've got it." Clara exhaled slowly. Her breath shook as it left her. On the way out, she stopped in front of a bookstore window and looked at her reflection. Her eyes were hard, her spine straight. She didn't look like someone losing control. She looked like a woman loading the final bullet in the chamber. That evening, Jill danced through the house like a woman with a secret. She poured wine again, made pasta, even offered to paint Clara's nails. But Clara said she was tired, and this time it was true. Not tired like age, tired of lies, of manipulation, of watching her own home turn into a crime scene in slow motion. She stood in the hall staring at the music box once more. The tune played. The carved message beneath the lid glowed faintly under lamplight. "If anything happens, trust our memories." Harold hadn't been a rich man, but he'd left Clara more than money. He'd left her the instinct to fight. The music stopped, and with it Clara's fear. The camera at the entryway caught Jill making a late-night call to the Traverse City agent. She whispered into her phone, pacing the foyer. "She'll sign the last doc tomorrow," she said. "Then we're good to go. You can list the house next week. I'll handle the seller's side." Gavin must have asked a question. Jill paused. "Yeah, no, she doesn't have any living heirs. She's barely got her memory. And no, she doesn't want to be involved in the sale. Doesn't even remember the place exists." Clara, watching from the hallway again, let out a slow, soundless breath, then walked into her room, locked the door, and opened her email. She uploaded the latest footage, labeled the file. "Final bait, ready." She sent it to Carol and to Monica. She poured herself a glass of wine, not to dull the nerves, but to celebrate the moment before the storm, because tomorrow the game would end, and Clara McMillan would no longer be prey. The house was quiet in a way that felt deeper than silence. It wasn't just soundless, it was hollow, like even the walls were holding their breath. Clara stood in the doorway of Harold's old study, the one room in the house she hadn't truly entered since he died. She'd walked past it 100 times, dusted the doorknob maybe twice a year. But she never opened it, never let the memories push past the frame. Until now. She stepped inside. The air was stale and still wrapped in time like a sealed vault. The curtains were drawn halfway, leaking weak morning light across a desk cluttered with yellowing papers and an old brass lamp. Harold's side of the room had remained untouched, his pens still in their wooden holder, a faded red sweater draped across the back of his armchair. Clara ran her hand across the desk slowly. Then she sat down. She hadn't cried since the funeral. Not properly. She hadn't allowed it. Everyone expected her to fall apart, so she didn't. She answered calls, signed forms, even made sandwiches for the guests afterward. But here in this dusty room that smelled faintly of ink and aftershave, the weight of everything pressed in. Her chest shook once, then again, until her face collapsed into her hands. A sob rose from somewhere deep, jagged, and hot and broke free. She let it. No one could see her here. No one was watching. She cried for Harold, for herself, for all the years she'd spent shrinking in the corners of her own life, for the lies, the betrayal, for the woman she used to be and the one she was about to become. When she finally looked up, her eyes landed on the journal, a small brown leather-bound book resting in the middle drawer. She knew it well, Harold's notebook for private thoughts. He never let her read it, said it was full of half-baked nonsense. She opened it with trembling fingers. His handwriting greeted her like an old friend. Most of the entries were familiar musings on former students' clippings from newspapers, lists of books he wanted to read but never did. But then, several pages in, she found something different. A date, 2 years before his death. March 8th. Finally filed the Traverse City property under Clara's name. Don't want James knowing, it'll complicate everything. It's hers. Always was. She loved that house more than I ever did. Told the lawyer to keep it quiet just in case. The box is the key. Clara stopped breathing. The box. The music box. It had all been planned. Harold hadn't forgotten her. He hadn't left her vulnerable. He'd tried to protect her from their son, from the man he could never quite admit had turned into something else. Clara stared at the words, Harold's quiet warning across time. Her fingers curled tightly around the notebook as her heartbeat settled into something slow and dangerous. He had trusted her with the key, and now she would use it. Upstairs, Jill was on the phone again. "I've booked the meeting for next Tuesday," she said in a hush. "He's sending the closing papers electronically." "Yeah." "The fake power of attorney passed. I told you she signed. Barely remembers her name anymore." Clara stood in the hallway silent. Jill's voice continued. "After the closing, I'll wire you the deposit. You'll take 10%. No need to complicate things. It'll all look clean." Clara's hands curled into fists. She didn't knock, didn't interrupt. She just walked away, into the guest room, where she opened a locked drawer and pulled out a thick manila envelope labeled Operation Finch. Inside, everything Carol had helped prepare. Legal briefs, authenticated footage, a notarized declaration from Clara herself, handwritten logs. All set. She slid the envelope into a FedEx mailer and sealed it shut. She texted Carol, "It's coming, D-Day is set." Then she opened her email and scheduled a message to send to Monica Dunn, the journalist, 3 days from now. If anything went wrong, the file would be released to the press. She triple-checked the subject line. "If I disappear, publish immediately." Satisfied, she clicked schedule, and the weight lifted. That night, the wind howled through the bare trees outside. The curtains fluttered even though the windows were closed. Clara stood by the fireplace, staring into the embers, one hand resting gently on the music box. She wound it once. The melody began its soft dance, rising into the room like smoke. It had always been their song, hers and Harold's. Played at their wedding by his brother on an out-of-tune violin. Danced to under flickering lights during power outages. Hummed while grading homework late at night. Now it played for her alone. She closed her eyes. In her mind, she saw him young again. His sleeves rolled up, ink on his fingers, eyes smiling without sound. He was grading essays. She was correcting spelling tests. They'd been so ordinary once, so beautifully, perfectly small. "Keep the house," he had said once, placing his hand on hers. "If anything happens to me, keep something that's yours, Clara. Promise me." She had promised, and now she intended to keep it. Suddenly the wind outside struck the house hard, rattling the windows like fists on glass. Somewhere upstairs a door creaked open. Then something unexpected happened. The music box stopped. Mid-song, Clara looked down puzzled. It had never done that before. She reached to wind it again, but before her fingers touched it, the melody resumed. as if it had paused. Not broken. She tilted her head. The box sat perfectly still, but its inner gears clicked on their own, like something inside had awakened. Her eyes welled again, not from sorrow, from certainty. "Harold," she whispered, "I hear you." Outside, snow began to fall again, this time heavier, louder. Each flake a whisper, a memory, a call to arms. Clara rose slowly, set the music box down, and moved to the desk. She pulled out the drawer, revealing the now empty safe. She didn't need what was inside anymore. She had everything she needed. The truth, the plan, the power. And just 2 more days before everything changed. The office was a clean white box tucked on the 8th floor of a steel and glass tower in downtown Traverse City. Framed art prints lined the walls. A glass bowl of peppermint sat untouched on the receptionist's desk. Beyond that, the conference room door stood open. Inside, Jill sat poised, polished, powerful. Her black heels were pointed crossed at the ankle. The navy suit she wore was tailored crisp, not a wrinkle in sight. Her nails were manicured to a soft pink sheen, the kind of gloss that said, "I am in control, and you are not." She smiled politely at the notary and the junior associate seated across from her. "I've brought all the necessary documents," she said, sliding the folder across the glossy wood. The realtor Gavin beamed beside her like a boy who'd brought home a prize trout. "This will be the smoothest closing I've ever done," he said to the room. Jill's smile stretched just a little too far. She could feel it now, freedom. A house in Florida. A new name. A second chance bought by deception. It was all within reach. The paralegal began reviewing the power of attorney. Just then the elevator dinged, and Jill's blood ran cold. The footsteps that followed were deliberate, unhurried. Clara Macmillan appeared in the doorway wearing a simple gray coat and a silk scarf tucked at the collar. Her spine was straight, her face unreadable. Behind her walked Carol Walter Briefcase in hand heels clicking like a metronome of judgment. Jill's voice cracked first. "Well, what are you doing here?" Clara didn't answer. She walked to the table and placed a thick file folder beside the contract Jill had just submitted. A quiet thud, heavy with implication. Gavin frowned. I'm sorry, are you Mrs. Macmillan?" "I am," Clara said, her voice cool. "The real one." Jill pushed back in her chair. "This is a misunderstanding. She's confused." "Clara, you don't remember." "Don't," Clara snapped. Her voice cut across the room like a switchblade. "You've been feeding off that lie for weeks, but today it dies." Carol opened the folder. "This is the original will, handwritten and notarized by Harold Macmillan. Dated 2 years prior to his death," she said calmly, laying it flat on the table. "It confirms that my client, Mrs. Clara Macmillan, is the sole beneficiary of the Traverse City property." Jill laughed, forced. "That's not real." Carol pulled out a second sheet. "This is the verified deed recorded and filed by the state registrar, showing legal title in Clara's name since 2013. Not your husband's, not yours, hers." She dropped it beside the will like a guillotine. Clara stepped forward, opening a laptop. "And this," she said, "is video footage. You, entering my study at night, taking photos, making calls. You even bragged about it to a realtor. Here, play it." The audio crackled to life. Jill's voice filled the room, unmistakable. "Yeah, she signed everything. Old Bat barely knows what day it is." Silence. Jill's mouth hung open. Her hands started to tremble. The notary, who'd been watching silently, quietly, closed his ledger and stepped back from the table. "You forged my name," Clara continued. "You opened credit cards under my identity, tried to sell what was never yours, and you would have gotten away with it if I were still the woman you thought I was." Jill's chair scraped loudly as she stood. I'm not. This isn't what it looks like." "It looks like felony fraud," Carol said. "It is felony fraud." Jill's face was colorless now. Her hand twitched toward her purse. "Sit down," Clara said coldly, "or walk out of here in cuffs. Your choice." Jill didn't move. Clara leaned forward, her voice low, deliberate. "I'm going to give you a single option. Walk away. From the house. From the accounts. From me. You disappear. You admit in writing that you forged everything, and you never contact me again. Ever." Jill's eyes filled wide and wet. "Or what?" Clara straightened. "Or I go to the press. And to the police. I send the tapes. I press every charge available. I call the IRS, the banks, the Bar Association, anyone who'll listen. You'll be the new face of elder fraud. A headline. A warning. The room went dead still. Carol's expression didn't shift. The paralegal cleared his throat awkwardly. Gavin looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. People like you, Clara said, think we're invisible. You think being old means being weak, but you forgot something. She leaned in close. We remember everything. Jill sank into the chair. She was unraveling fast. This was just a mistake, she whispered. I was desperate. I didn't mean to hurt you. You meant to take everything from me, Clara replied. You succeeded. And now you're going to give it all back. Jill broke. She dropped her gaze, pulled a pen from her purse, and signed the withdrawal statement. Carol slid across the table. Her hands shook so badly the ink smeared. Carol notarized it. Gavin gathered the sale documents with the care of a man removing evidence from a crime scene. Clara stepped back, still watching Jill like a hawk circling its prey. You'll receive a letter, Clara said. Formal notice. You'll sign it. And then I'll never see your face again. Jill said nothing. She didn't even lift her head. Clara turned to leave and Carol followed. At the elevator, the doors opened with a chime. Clara looked back one last time. Jill was still sitting there, head bowed, surrounded by the remains of her failed con. No music, no words, just the cold electric hum of a ruined plan. The doors closed, and Clara didn't look back again. The front door closed behind them with a hollow click, the kind of sound that marked the end of a storm more than the beginning of silence. Clara stood still in the foyer, hands folded, coat still on the echo of fluorescent lights from the legal office, still buzzing in her ears. Her breath felt heavier now, not from exhaustion, but from the strange quiet that follows justice, when it finally mercilessly arrives. Jill was sitting on the couch, shoulders slumped, head bowed. Tears streaked her mascara and her voice was hoarse from pleading. You don't understand, she said for the third time, her voice cracking. I didn't know how else to survive. Clara looked at her without blinking. No one held a gun to your head when you printed my signature, she said evenly. I was drowning, Jill whispered. You were greedy. Jill reached for Clara's hand, but Clara stepped back. That absence of touch was louder than any slap. You lived here, Clara said. You watched me struggle. You saw me count pennies for groceries, and the whole time you were filling out mortgage applications behind my back. Jill crumpled further. Please, if this gets out, I'll lose everything. Clara tilted her head. You mean your reputation? Jill said nothing. Clara opened her purse and withdrew a fresh document 3 pages long, typed, signed by Carol Walter and reviewed by the courts that morning. This says you relinquish all claims, Clara said. To my name, my estate, the Michigan house. Everything. You'll write a written confession that I'll keep sealed for now, and you'll never contact me again. Jill looked at the papers, eyes wild. And if I don't, then you'll be a headline by morning. The threat hung in the room, not shouted, not theatrical, just true. Jill looked down at the pen Clara slid toward her. She didn't reach for it right away. She wept instead, loud and sharp, ugly, a kind of weeping that knew it wasn't for sympathy, it was the sound of a plan unraveling for good. When her hands finally moved, they trembled. She signed. Clara picked up the papers without another word and walked them into her study. The door shut with a finality that made Jill flinch. Later that afternoon, Jill packed in silence. A suitcase, a few loose coats, some toiletries. She left behind the perfume, the pictures, the expensive candles she used to hide the smell of guilt. She paused at the threshold, once turned to look at Clara, who stood at the foot of the stairs, arms crossed. I know you hate me, Jill said softly. I don't, Clara replied. Jill blinked. Then why? Because hate is emotional. This, Clara gestured toward the door. This is structural. You broke something. Now it's gone. Jill's lip trembled. Clara's eyes didn't. Don't ever come back, she said. Jill nodded once, and then she was gone. No final words, no slammed doors, just the quiet sound of a car pulling away from the curb. That night, Clara sat alone in the living room. The fireplace was unlit, and her tea had gone cold on the side table. The house creaked around her, not from wear, but from weight lifted. She held the music box in her lap, fingers tracing the smooth wood, the carved birds, the faint grooves left by Harold's quiet, loving hands. She wound it once. The music began, but this time it sounded different, like it had waited for this silence. The melody drifted into every corner of the room like smoke, like memory, like a blessing. She let it play. She cried once, but not like before. These tears weren't from pain. They were the kind that came when the body finally realized it was safe again. After the song ended, Clara stood. She moved through the house slowly, deliberately, one photo at a time. A frame removed from the mantel, a box filled with letters, report cards, graduation photos, James in his football uniform, Jill in a Halloween costume from the year she still called Clara Mom. She didn't throw them away. She placed them carefully into a wooden trunk and locked it. The past wasn't something to destroy, but it was something to close. She returned to the office, opened Harold's last will one more time, and pressed it to her chest. His handwriting was solid beneath her fingers, strong, decided. "I'm keeping the promise, Harold," she whispered. "I'm doing it right this time." Then she picked up the phone. The call went to voicemail, so she left a message. "This is Clara McMillan. I'd like to list a property for sale. The Chicago one. Yes, I've got all the papers, but this time I'm selling it my way." The sale happened quietly. A private listing, no frills, no signs posted, no photos spread across the internet. Just one family walking through the door on a snowy Thursday afternoon, holding hands with their little girl and whispering about where the Christmas tree would go. Clara watched from the kitchen, saying nothing. The new mother walked into Harold's old study and gasped softly. "It feels like someone loved this place," she said. Clara smiled. Someone did. The paperwork was signed within a week. Full asking price, no haggling. The new owners promised to take care of the garden in spring. On the final day, Clara stood in the empty hallway one last time. No more photos on the walls, no more echoes of betrayal, just space and light. She held the music box in one hand and the Michigan deed in the other. Then she closed the door. The two-lane road curved through golden trees like a ribbon of silence. Autumn in northern Michigan was all flame and rust, the leaves dancing their last waltz before the snow came. Clara sat in the passenger seat of a moving van, bundled in a navy coat, her fingers tucked inside knit gloves. Her gaze stayed fixed ahead, but her mind drifted between memory and anticipation, past and future. The driver, a soft-spoken college student named Marcus, smiled at her through the mirror. "You sure you don't want me to help you settle in?" "I'll be fine," Clara said gently. "I've got work to do." They pulled up to the old house just after noon. It stood tall on a patch of land edged with birch trees and silent maples. The porch sagged slightly. The shutters had faded into a soft gray. A gentle coat of dust veiled the windows, but beneath it all the bones were strong. The house waited like it had held its breath through the years just for her return. Clara stepped out of the van and onto the gravel drive. The wind carried the scent of dry leaves and pine. She stood there a long moment, her boots crunching on scattered twigs, and just looked. Then she smiled. The key fit perfectly in the lock. The front door creaked open, releasing a waft of stale air and old secrets. Sunlight poured through the warped windows, revealing cobwebs dancing in corners, dust motes floating like soft ghosts in the beams of gold. Every floorboard she stepped on gave a gentle groan as if sighing with relief. The piano still stood in the corner untouched. A faded rug sprawled across the foyer like an old friend stretched out for a nap. She passed the fireplace, her hand brushing the brick, then stepped into the main room where Harold once read to her in the evening's legs-folded cat on the hearth. Clara took a deep breath. This was no longer a memory. It was a beginning. 2 weeks later, the sign went up. Legal voice for elders. Free support and advocacy for older adults. It wasn't flashy. No big budget, no corporate donors. Just Clara, 2 donated desks, a refurbished copier, and 1 teenage volunteer who'd answered a flyer taped to the grocery store bulletin board. Her name was Riley, 17, freckled cheeks, wore combat boots with her skirt, and carried a notebook filled with drawings and half-written poems. On her first day, Riley walked in chewing the end of her pencil and said, "So, you're doing this for real?" Clara looked up from the files on her desk. "Depends. You ready to work for real?" Riley grinned. "Try me." Word spread slowly. It began with a widow named June who showed up holding a manila envelope with shaking hands. "My son had me sign something after my husband died," she whispered. "Now I can't access my bank account." Clara brought her tea, sat beside her, went through the papers page by page. That signature doesn't look like yours, Clara said softly. June wept. Clara helped her file a petition to regain financial control. A week later, a man in his late 70s shuffled in wearing a windbreaker and a nervous smile. Is this the place where the lady helps people who've been swindled? That depends, Clara said. Have you been swindled? He pulled out 3 letters from a reverse mortgage company he didn't remember contacting. Take a seat, Clara said. We'll look at it together. By the end of the month, a steady stream had begun. Some brought legal messes. Some just brought stories. Most were afraid. All were tired. They came with brittle voices and hopeful eyes. They came from farms, from trailer parks, from nursing homes and long-forgotten streets, and Clara welcomed them all. She kept a jar of butterscotch candies on the front counter. A kettle always whistled softly in the back. And the music box. Harold's music box sat on a shelf behind her desk, its lid slightly open, ready. One Wednesday morning, as the sun poured through the wide bay window, Riley walked into Clara's office holding a file. Mrs. McMillan, she said. This woman, her daughter, emptied her savings account. She has no one. Clara stood. Bring her in. Riley hesitated. She's scared, like really scared. Clara walked to the waiting area. A woman in her early 80s sat curled in the chair arms around her purse like armor. Clara knelt beside her. You're safe here, she said. The woman didn't speak, but she nodded, her eyes wide. That afternoon, after they'd started the paperwork, Clara stepped into the back room to take a breath. Riley followed her. Can I ask you something? She said quietly. Clara turned. Why are you doing this? Clara smiled. Because no one else did it for me, and because someone should. Riley fidgeted. No one ever believed me when I said I wanted to do something that mattered. Clara tilted her head. Well, I believe you. Riley blinked. You're the first person who has, she said, her voice cracking. Clara reached for her hand. And you'll be the first to stand up for someone else. In the background, the phone rang again. Another voice, another plea, another story about something taken. Clara walked back to her desk and answered the call. Legal voice for elders, this is Clara. How can I help you? The headline ran across the top of page 2 bold serif font, over a grayscale photo of Clara standing beside a wooden sign, hand on the shoulder of a silver-haired man with a cane. Betrayed elder fights back, builds legal sanctuary for the forgotten. The byline read Monica Dunn, investigative reporter. Underneath a subhead in smaller font, after surviving identity theft and attempted property fraud by a family member, 74-year-old Clara McMillan turns her pain into purpose, launching a legal aid center that's changing lives across northern Michigan. Jill saw the paper from a vending machine at the railway platform. She was on her way to nowhere, backpacked, coat frayed at the sleeves, scarf twisted against the wind, like she couldn't quite protect herself from it anymore. The city had lost its glow. Her world had gone dim. She stared at the article behind the scratched plexiglass coins half frozen in her palm. It wasn't the headline that stopped her. It was the photo. Clara looked alive, not triumphant, not vengeful, but peaceful, resolved. And beneath that image in the sidebar labeled social lessons, there it was, a grainy photo of Jill cropped from an old public record. Next to it, the caption, perpetrator's identity shielded by law, but her actions speak loudly. Jill flinched. Her hand dropped. The coins fell. She didn't read the rest. She just turned away. And for the first time, the consequences felt real. Back in Traverse City, Clara sat across from a woman named Eleanor. Eleanor was 82, wore orthopedic shoes, and spoke like someone who hadn't been heard in years. My son told me I had to move out, she whispered. Said the mortgage wasn't in my name anymore. I don't know when it changed. He said it's too complicated to explain. Clara didn't blink. Do you have the papers? The woman handed her a crumpled envelope. Inside, a transfer of deed dated 3 months after her husband died. No signature from Eleanor. Clara examined it silently, then looked up. We can fight this. Eleanor's hands trembled. I don't want to cause trouble. You're not, Clara said softly. You're reclaiming your life. That was how every story started now, with a whisper, a tremble, a cautious hope. And every day the line at the center's front desk grew longer. By midweek, there were no chairs left in the waiting room. People stood with folders clutched to their chests like life rafts. Men with veteran hats. Women with calloused hands. Widows. Caregivers. Survivors. Riley brought in a second coffee pot. They added a folding table in the hallway. A former judge donated old office chairs from his garage. and still they ran out of room. But not heart. Clara moved from table to table, smile, calm eyes locked on each person, as if they were the only one that mattered. A former librarian, a retired nurse, a man who lost his wife and then his home, each with a story, each met with dignity. One Thursday afternoon, the camera crew came. It wasn't planned. A producer from the local affiliate station had read Monica's article and insisted on doing a follow-up. Just a small segment, she'd said. A feel-good piece before the holidays. Clara almost declined. But then Riley said people need to know what's possible. And so Clara agreed. She wore a gray sweater and her mother's brooch. No makeup, just her truth. The reporter asked her what she hoped the center would accomplish. Clara glanced toward the waiting room where Eleanor was laughing with a woman from the county clerk's office. Then she answered, "I want people to know that you don't get weaker with age. You just get more dangerous if you decide to use everything you've learned." The crew stayed for an hour. The footage aired that night, and by morning the calls doubled. That evening, Clara stood in the empty main room after the last client left. Riley had gone home. The lights were dim, the tea kettle finally silent. Outside, the first snow of the season was falling, soft, steady, inevitable. She walked to the window. The porch light glowed against the flurry, and the trees in the yard shimmered under the fresh powder. Each branch looked like it had been dipped in sugar. Behind her, the music box sat still on the bookshelf. Clara didn't wind it. She didn't need to. She already knew the song by heart. She turned off the lamp and stepped into the night. The house was quiet, not empty. The kind of quiet born of peace, not absence. The last of the sunlight filtered through the wide bay windows, warming the honey-colored floorboards and casting long shadows over the shelves stacked with files, case folders and binders filled with second chances. The legal voice for elders sign hung just above the mantel, its letters golden in the dusk. Clara moved slowly, deliberately through the center, checking locks, flipping light switches, tidying the sign-in clipboard. She was the last to leave now, and she liked it that way. It was her ritual, a closing prayer. She stepped into her office, set down her mug, and walked to the bookshelf where the music box waited. She hadn't touched it in weeks. It sat closed still like a silent witness. But tonight something in the air called for it something final. Clara reached for it, fingers brushing the carved wood. She wound it once. The delicate gears stirred. And then music. The melody rose soft and aching, twirling into the room like the scent of old books in autumn air. The familiar notes, each one a step back through memory, each one a truth carried through grief and fire. Clara closed her eyes. And then a voice, her voice older, stronger, floated in above the tune. V.O. The scary part isn't the betrayal. It's what comes after. It's the silence, the shame, the hollow ache that convinces you to stay broken. But you don't have to. You don't ever have to. She opened her eyes and looked around the room. On the walls, thank you cards in shaky handwriting. Photos of clients reunited with homes with dignity. A mural Riley had painted in acrylics, two hands lifting a third from a shadow. Standing back up is where the story begins. The shot widened. In the main room, 5 elderly clients sat in a circle near the fireplace. Cups of tea in their hands, a plate of cookies in the middle. They were talking, laughing softly, not about lawyers or losses, but about memories, about grandchildren, about the color of the sky that morning, and a silly story from 1962. The camera drifted through the space past them, past a framed article from the Traverse City Gazette, past a photo of Clara in her teaching days. Then over to Riley, now seated at the front desk, smiling as she helped a man schedule his appointment. For a moment the screen held on her face. Then a slow zoom to Clara, now standing in the doorway to the gathering room, one hand on the frame, listening. The firelight flickered over her cheekbones. Her scarf was the same one she'd worn the day she walked into the law office in Chicago, but her posture had changed. She wasn't shrinking anymore. She was grounded. The music box still played now on its final bars. And just as the melody reached its gentle end, the screen dimmed ever so slightly, and text appeared in white letters across the bottom. Based on thousands of real cases reported annually in the United States, involving elder financial abuse often committed by family members. Most go unreported. If you or someone you know needs help, speak up. There is always a way back. The final image returned. Clara stood in the middle of a golden forest trees ablaze with autumn leaves. The center was visible behind her, tucked between trunks, glowing warm through its windows. She looked up toward the sky, eyes steady, lips pressed together, not in grief, but in knowing. Her hair danced in the wind. Her arms were at her sides, not clutched to her chest. There was no voice now, only music, hopeful, unhurried. The camera slowly pulled back higher, wider, until she was just a figure in a clearing surrounded by rust-colored trees, held by the land she'd reclaimed not just on paper, but in spirit.